Right, so on the 29th of October, I posted this video about An Se-young, going through her whole situation, which concluded with her actions, etc., that happened at the Denmark Open. It got loads and loads of traction, loads and loads of views, which is great, but I left that video open with a kind of question mark over her future. You know, I posed two potential ultimatums, and this video isn't going to answer those. However, just 2 days after I released it, an article came out in the Korea Times that gave a massive amount of updates. Huge change and overhauls that are going to happen to Korean badminton, the Korean Badminton Association, and also Korean sport as a whole. So An Se-young has managed to, in a way, if all of what I'm about to talk about actually comes into fruition, which I believe the majority, if not all of it, will, then she has shifted Korean sport. That's quite impressive, that's quite a feat. So I've got the article in front of me on my laptop. It's from the Korea Times, and the title of it is An Se-young's concerns spark major overhaul in Badminton Korea Association. Obviously I'm going to go through this article and tell you what were the changes and just give a little bit of my own thoughts on it. Not too much because I don't want this video to go on too long, and the main thing is the changes, which I promise you are pretty massive, okay? The first thing, it's not a change to the Korean sport, but it is quite a big change to the Korean Badminton Association, and that is the BKA president, Kim Taek-gyu, has been fired. He's no more. It was over multiple allegations such as money embezzlement, collusion with sponsors. Also in this article there's something about anger and, let me find it quickly because it's something about what happened. Here we go. That's it. It is also revealed that it had reported Kim on Monday to the relevant authorities under the Labour Standards Act for alleged verbal abuse, profanity and demands for excessive courtesies during a BKA workshop in April. So that kind of gives you an understanding of that's the guy at the top, and that's how he behaves, you know, demanding excessive courtesies. He's violent, uses profanity, so you can imagine that he kind of blows his top at a lot of things. So the kind of, if that guy's leading it, then you can only imagine what's underneath it. So it's a good thing that he's no more. It doesn't state in this article who's going to take his place. I think there needs to be a huge overall following these changes that the government, the sports ministry, have put upon them. The other thing, before I get into the changes, is that it's been estimated, I think, that the BKA could own the government over $6 million. It's like 9 billion won or something, and that's just an estimation. I think that is part of the collusion with potential sponsors and just money embezzlement. That's the total it came to. So it's not like a minute amount. That is a lot. That's a lot of money that could have gone towards the athletes, could have gone to all the things that An Se-young said, such as she needs her own sports physio or needs her own team or whatever it may be. Other players have probably asked for similar. That $6 million could have gone a long way to helping with that. So that's a lot of money to recoup. It could be more, it could be slightly less. The estimation is, say, about $6 million. It doesn't say how they're going to get that money back, but just that they're reporting on it. Right, so those two things out of the way. Now we're into the kind of changes. Okay. Beyond enforcing disciplinary measures, the ministry announced new policies to support national team players, incorporating feedback from An and other badminton players. These updates include improved injury management, expanded medical services, enhanced living conditions at training centres, customised training programs, and access to personal trainers. So that's really good. Obviously, that's kind of the stuff that An Se-young was saying, that she needed a team. I think she did have one at one point, but then the money for that ran out, or it wasn't allowed to go on over a certain period of time. So it's really good that they're going to be able to have a more professional setup. I think that's kind of aimed towards hoping that, and a lot of these changes I think of this, but that An Se-young won't want to leave the BK, that she will be happy to remain if she's able to kind of basically be an independent player within the BKA, if that makes kind of sense. I'm not saying that's exactly what it is, but you know, the stuff that an independent player will have, like their own training programs, their own physios, their own team behind them. It seems like the BKA or the government are enforcing them to kind of look at that and implement it within the Korean badminton system. So that's a great thing if that can come ahead. To empower athletes to make their own healthcare decisions, players will be allowed to receive treatment from a facility of their choice. Medical facilities at the national team's official training centre will also be expanded to accommodate this change. Again, that's kind of a follow-on from the previous point, but just having more autonomy over what happens to you, kind of you're in control of decision makings. If you're not happy with the medical doctor that's been provided by the association, then you're allowed to go out and find your own person that you might have more trust in. Because I think just like with your coaches, just like with your PTs in the gym, the people that are going to the physios and the osteopaths that are going to kind of help you when you're injured or you need to recover and all this kind of stuff are just as important. So to have that trust in them, you need trust in every single layer. So it's really good that they're allowing players to look outside just the probably the one option that they were given before. So the sports ministry further committed to addressing what are described as outdated practices in national teams. Moving forward, athletes will have more freedom on weekends and holidays, and a long-standing tradition that assigns household chores to junior players will be eliminated. That's really good. I know there probably might be some people in the comments saying that, if juniors are given these chores or whatever it may be, it doesn't necessarily have to be like the kind of stuff that was reported on the washing the male underwear, etc. But doing odd jobs, you could argue maybe that builds a little bit of character, but at the same time, there are other ways to build character. You don't need to get people to do chores. It seems that silly in terms of laundry or restringing, because I know in other national centres that they have dedicated staff for that. So, why not have a person who's there to wash the kit? They will have people there to clean the courts and all that kind of stuff. So it just makes no sense that the players who are training probably 7-8 hours a day have to then spend that precious recovery time washing the dishes, doing the laundry, stringing rackets. We can talk about that as character building all we like, but this is a national centre designed to make the best athletes there are. So by giving them these tasks that, to be honest, can be given to someone else, someone that can earn a living from it, and that time for the athlete could go better prepared into making them an even better athlete by recovery. We all know recovery is one of the biggest tools and the biggest things behind success. It's just a no-brainer. So it's really good that they're going to get rid of that. In addition, the KSOC's policy requiring early morning training 4 times a week and twice monthly mountain climbing implemented in April 2023 will be effectively discontinued, allowing each team to determine its own training schedule. Now, for that one, when I read that, I had flashbacks to my own training. I'm not saying I didn't run up mountains, but 2-3 times a week I'd be up on the common out in the woods running around in God knows what weather, doing hill sprints and all this kind of stuff. And early morning training was something I did when I was at the National Centre, regularly doing bike circuits and hurdles and jumps at 6-7 o'clock in the morning. So and even before then I used to get up early, and I do so now, get up at 5 to train. So early morning training and the mountain stuff, yeah, it's good that it's probably not ideal. Not the early morning training, the mountain stuff. I'm not quite sure how that's going to help your badminton, although I've seen other national teams do it. But I think what is important here is the last part, is allowing each team to determine its own training schedule. That's quite crucial, because I think one of the big things An Se-young said was that because Korea have been always so good at doubles, I think a lot of their players that become coaches are doubles players. So I think a lot of the training has been centered around double stuff. An Se-young said that obviously to become a singles player is completely different, and it's only getting more and more different as the sport evolves and as time moves on. So really good that each team can set their own training program, the training program that's going to work best for their discipline and for their players. So the early morning training and the mountain running, I don't necessarily see that as an issue, as long as it's got a point and a purpose and it can be something that the players can recover from. But the fact that each team now gets to implement their own training schedule, that's a really good thing. The ministry will also allow national athletes across all sports, including badminton, to bring personal trainers to national training sessions. National badminton players returning from international competitions will be guaranteed a rest period before resuming training. Now, before I get to the first part, that last part, I'm surprised that's not a thing already. Players, especially we're just talking about badminton here, but the World Tour is really tough. sometimes, like say An Se-young especially, she's playing an absolute shit ton of tournaments. If she's been on the road 3 to 4 weeks, travelling thousands of miles, she gets back from that. Why is not rest something that is just mandatory? I mean, if I was her coach, I would say that you need to take a few days. At least 1 or 2 days at least. So it's good that that's become something that's going to have to be enforced. But I honestly, when I read that, I'm just like, how is that not a thing already? The first part, that's where I said at the start that what this investigation into the BK has done is actually not just change Korean badminton, but Korean sports. So all national athletes at the national centre, because I think in Korea it's like one big centre. Obviously it's probably spread around, and I've never been there, but from what I've seen and what I've heard is that a lot of national athletes are all training kind of within the same complex, etc. So the fact that all of those can now have their own personal trainers come into their training sessions and help them is really good. And again, I think I'll echo what I said earlier. I think this is a way to kind of keep An Se-young within the BKA, because she'll feel like she's got that independence, but she's still under the BKA, under the Korean sporting roof. The ministry will remove long-standing restrictions on international competition participation, a unique rule previously enforced by the BKA. Athletes may now compete in international leagues and invitational tournaments at their own expense or with support from their teams. A policy restricting international competition eligibility for athletes based on age and national team experience will also be eliminated. So again, all these kind of restrictions that the BKA have put on their players is gone. And I think this is going to be really good. I think what I've seen from other national teams is when they've got their kind of, I guess, their second team or their juniors up and coming, their next generation, even if they're not part of the national team, you see them being sent out. I've seen Japan do this, Chinese Taipei, Malaysia, Indonesia doing it now. It's really good. They're not necessarily national team athletes. They might just not quite have made the cut, because I think getting into Korea, the national team is pretty tough. Probably one of the toughest in the world. So the fact that players that don't quite make it can still have opportunities to go out into international competition and prove themselves, because I don't know how the selection process exactly works in Korea. That is something else that's mentioned within this within this article. But I know that it's incredibly tough. And so if you're a player that's just on the peripheries or a young player, the likelihood of you getting in, you have to be absolutely exceptional. So it gives players a chance to, maybe they didn't make the national selection, but they're going to get sent to some tournaments because they're still really good. And they might be that player that wasn't able to deliver their best results under the pressure of the selection process, but somehow when it comes internationally, they can suddenly produce amazing results. And then obviously the national team can go, oh, hang on a minute, we didn't think much of this guy, but actually look what he's done. Or look at this women's doubles pair. You know, we weren't even considering them, but they've gone and done really well at these tournaments, and their world ranking has climbed. And obviously Korea, where they have a big hole, is in the men's singles, and the women's singles, obviously, of An Se-young is good, but beyond their top 3 or 4, it drops a little bit off a cliff. Maybe this is a way to get some of those players back interested. We might start to see more kind of Korean players on the circuit that might actually suddenly, with that experience and that exposure, which is a huge thing in a player improving, suddenly is going to rise, and Korea can actually maybe get some singles players from this. I actually spend a lot of time each morning watching badminton videos, and I follow a couple of Korean channels, and they're putting up all these videos of, most of them are doubles. There are some players that probably none of you have ever heard of. I'd never heard of international competition, but they are phenomenal. Like, I saw one where it was Seo-Sun-jae was playing with Kim Won-ho. We both know those names, and they were playing 2 players that I had never heard of. Seo-Sun-jae and Kim Won-ho won, but it was like 22-20, 22-20. That's the level of players within Korea that before now never got to see. So I think we're going to see more of those, and I think it actually could be a really good thing for Korea, and I think the rest of the badminton world might need to be a little bit worried about that, because we might start seeing more Korean badminton players getting stronger and stronger. Sponsorship terms for players will also change to enhance their rights. Athletes will be able to choose their own equipment, such as rackets and shoes, and display one of their personal sponsors' logos on national team uniforms, a right that will be guaranteed among 5 sponsor logos permitted on uniforms. Okay, this is obviously a good thing for the players to be able to earn more of an income, which is great, because I think I remember watching that This Is Badminton video, and again, I can't remember off the top of my head, but basically, if you compare Korean athletes, badminton athletes, to everyone else in the badminton world, they're making absolute pittance. It's basically just prize money, and I think even from there, there's a big chunk that goes to the BKA. So players being allowed to kind of involve different sponsors and use different kit is really good step forward. I remember when I did my last video, I found this it was like an investigative piece. Obviously it was in Korean. I tried it with the caption subtitles on YouTube, but that's a bit, yeah. But anyway, I didn't need to have the subtitles on one part where I think it's Kim Taek-yu, the former BKA president, and this guy from the ministry, I'm assuming a sports minister, and this guy, and on the screen is a projection of An Seung's feet using the shoes that she was forced to use by the BKA, and her feet were in tatters. And this guy, you don't need to understand Korean to know that he was pissed off, and he was really going at him, going, basically, what the fuck are you doing? Absolutely idiotic rule. And so it's really good that that's no longer a thing. Players won't have to kind of worry. They'll be able to get their own sponsors, earn more money, and they can choose the kit they want. Most likely they'll choose it from within their sponsor, because Korean team's sponsored by Yonex, who, to be honest, are a decent company. Not as good as Li-Ning. Anyway, shameless plug out of the way. The selection process for national doubles badminton players will be revamped to remove subjective evaluations and establish an objective merit-based assessment. Again, I don't profess to know the ins and outs, the intricacies of the Korean badminton selection process, but I know that it's really brutal and cutthroat. I think last year, was it Na Seung, who I thought was absolutely sublime, who hadn't lost a team match at that point with Kim Won-ho, didn't make the cut, and they went, nope, okay, you're not in. And it was absolutely crazy. I was like, what? That would have been a great partnership, him and Kim Won-ho. They weren't having any of it, so they're very strict. And also, the fact that they've mentioned it subjectively, I always thought that it was done on results, but it probably wasn't. There was probably some backhanded stuff, some currying of favours, just playing into that whole Korean culture that, we can imagine. Actually, what I'm going to say here is probably not just Korea. There's probably maybe some of that going on all around the world. Politics gets into absolutely everything. But it's really good that there's going to be a merit-based assessment, so it's more objective. So you either made it or you didn't. But obviously, they're probably going to keep some subjectivity, because that's also important, because if a player doesn't quite perform on one particular day of the year, that shouldn't mean that they don't make the team if they've done really well the rest of the year or they've shown real promise. There's got to be that little bit of open for players to make their way in, just on the feeling the coach gets, because especially if the coach is experienced, they will have a gut feeling, and I think that needs to be played into. But it's still really good that they're kind of changing. Yeah, it's really good that they're changing these archaic things. Actually, that was the last one. I thought there was one more, but there is something else, and it's a quote right at the bottom from the sports minister. The sports minister, who is called Lee Jong-woo. And it's damning, to be honest, and I'm going to finish this video with it. I'm not going to add any thoughts. It's just, I'm going to leave it there, and yeah, it's powerful. This is the BKA's last chance to set things right. If it fails again, we will designate it as unable to self-regulate and appoint a management committee to dismiss all officials and suspend all funding except for athlete support.